The maritime and shipbuilding sector is by its nature very complex, capital intensive, and strategically significant, and it deserves conversations that are equally rigorous and forward-looking. I'm confident this next session will bring depth, candor, and actionable perspectives to the table. Our first panel discussion for the day is on shipbuilding in a shifting world, India's role in the Indo-Pacific. I invite our moderator, Mr. Mohanlal Pillai, CEO, MEC Marine Engineers, on the dais. A huge round of applause for Mr. Pillai. Followed by our panel members, Vice Admiral Ankur Sharma, Nausena Medal, Director General, Naval Project Mumbai. Please maybe have a round of applause for them. Thank you. Mr. Arjun Chowgule, Managing Director, Chowgule Group. Mr. Vishal Kanwar, Partner, PwC India. And Ms. Sapna Dipu, AGM, Forward Design and Contracts, Mazgon Dock Shipbuilders Limited. A huge round of applause for our panelists, and over to you, Mr. Pillai.
Good morning, distinguished guests, delegates, colleagues and friends. It's an honor to welcome you all for this session of shipbuilding in a shifting world, India's role in Indo-Pacific. Thank you all, our distinguished panelists, for joining us today. We actually have a very prospective spanning naval strategy, private industry, defense innovation, and global leader in consulting and advisory services. So this expertise in strategy, finance, and sustainability brings a critical lens to our discussion, helping us to explore how policy, investment, and industry transformations can align to make India a hub for green shipbuilding. With a diverse panel, such a diverse panel, we are uniquely positioned to explore how India can shape the future of shipbuilding in the Indo-Pacific. Let's begin by looking at the big picture, how global ships are redefining shipbuilding, where India stands in this transformation. Now with India with a strategic location, expanding shipyards, and commitment to sustainability is not just adapting, it's leading actually. Last 45 years, if this conference would have been made, a couple of years back, I would have been totally skeptical. Things are not happening. We have been hearing only about policy decisions, empty promises, nothing has happened. But in the last maybe 1 year, things have drastically changed. Everybody is in a buoyant mood. Things are moving so fast. The recent example of CSL signing a container ship order with with MSC is a major milestone. And now even the private sector shipyard, Swan Shipbuilding, getting a Norwegian order for 6 chemical tankers. It's a new development. So it's very encouraging that we are poised to take off, and we are almost doing that. Now in this session, we'll explore how India can balance competitiveness with innovation, align policy with industry, and build partnerships and redefine the future of shipbuilding in the Indo-Pacific. It's actually, we are meeting at a time when the maritime industries are undergoing a profound transformation. Now from hybrid inland craft to advanced tankers, naval resilience to green commercial shipping, India is not just responding to global ships, it's shaping them. So we are today in a much better position to discuss and evaluate what is our strategy now, how we are going to proceed in the future. As a moderator, my role is to ensure surface perspectives and pose questions to our esteemed panelists and take their views on this. We have a very diverse set of panelists with us. First is Vice Admiral Ankush Sharma, Admiral Superintendent Naval Dockyard. He brings in a unmatched strategic insight from the front lines of maritime security as Vice Admiral of Indian Navy. He has overseen operations that safeguard India's interests across the Indo-Pacific, and his perspective will help us understand how shipbuilding is innovation ties directly to national resilience and regional stability. So my first question will be to you, sir. From a naval perspective, how does India's shipbuilding capacity influence its ability to safeguard interest in the Indo-Pacific?
Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, it's my proud privilege to be out here amidst all the seafarers connected with shipbuilding in one form or the other. As I sit out here, I talk from a point wherein I spent around 30 years of my 40 years of service in the Navy in assignments related to shipbuilding, ship repair and maintenance, ship operations, and technology infusion. All these combined make shipbuilding complete for me. So what I'm going to share is my views across all these spectrums. Whilst I sit out here, I'll cover in three baskets. One is the geopolitical situation, how it is changing our shipbuilding. Second is the technology. And third is the Indian defense shipbuilding industry, which has matured. And as we go down my discussion, you will realize today, from where we were importing ships, we are totally independent. Not a single ship is being built abroad. Everything is being built within the country. As we all are aware, world is in a turmoil. We've got conflicts across, be it Israel, Hamas, be it Ukraine, be it Pakistan and Afghanistan. You look out anywhere, there's a conflict happening. Apart from that, President Trump has got the tariffs. So the world is not in transition. It is rediscovering itself. The old world order is no longer relevant. Old world organizations have lost their relevance. In this dynamic state, we have to define our construct, how we operate, and as we see every day, it is changing. We in the Global South are a very important juncture in history. India's geographical location plays a critical role in this evolving scenario. Why do I say that? Because 95% of India's trade by volume and 70% by value moves through these Indian Ocean and the sea lines around India. India's maritime sector is valued at approximately $130 billion. And it's expected to go upwards to $300 billion by another year or two. Looking at the strategic importance of Indian Ocean, many countries are seeking to enter this area. And our initial thoughts which were there, we can no longer continue to consider Indian Ocean as our own backyard. Nearly 46% of global trade passes through the Indian Ocean sea lanes. This shows the strategic importance of the Indian Ocean. Indian Ocean handles 2/3 of the world's oil shipments, 1/3 of the bulk cargo, and half of the global container traffic. The security of this Indian Ocean is very important, not only for India, but for the world. Apart from the trade part, the Indian Ocean holds large volumes of natural resources. The India's 75,000 square kilometer seabed has estimated to be 380 million tons of minerals lying buried, which are waiting to be extracted. Apart from that, we've got rich fishery sectors which needs to be protected. Security of all these marine assets, natural resources, fishing is of paramount importance for the entire development of the country. So we as a country have realized the importance of maritime industry and its safety and the safety of this maritime industry. Before I come to the shipbuilding construct, I like to just broadly brush through the shipbuilding industry and India. Many of you in the audience would not be aware, and one of the presentation mentioned that our shipbuilding industry is around 2 to 3 decades old. I tend to disagree with it because Indian shipbuilding industry goes to 1700s. 10 kilometers from here, Naval Dockyard in 1700 was building ships. We've got one of the oldest graving dock in the world in the Naval Dockyard. The Naval Dockyard has built ships from HMS Drake, HMS Trincomalee, HMS Minden. HMS Trincomalee is the oldest floating sailing ship still available. It's berthed in Portsmouth, and that was built in Bombay in Naval Dockyard. Another story goes is HMS Minden, which was again built in Naval Dockyard, Mumbai, is the ship where the American national anthem was written. So we do have a rich shipbuilding history with us. Coming to post-independence, I'll talk about the warship construction timeline. In 1965, we decided that we will make our own warship design bureau, then known as Directorate of Naval Design. Since then, Directorate of Naval Design has grown by leaps and bounds. They have designed 20 warships classes, amounting to around 102 ships. So we have built 20 classes of ships and thereafter constructed 102 ships, indigenously designed and indigenously built. From building ships of 30,000 tons, we have gone to 35 lakh tons today. That is, Indian naval ships which are built have a capacity of 35 lakh tons. If we look at what is our order book within the Indian shipyards, mainly DPSUs. We've got orders of 58 warships and submarines which are under construction. These ongoing projects amount to 90,000 crores. If we look at the future, the coming 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years, we've got 69 warships and 120 small crafts which are in the pipeline, which are waiting to be constructed amongst all of us sitting out here in the shipyard, in defense shipyard. They're waiting. And the biggest of all is we are not heading outside the Indian continent. We are going to make these ships within our captive shipyards, be it DPSUs, be it the private shipyards. At the national level, we envisage an investment of 3.5 lakh crores in the coming years. And these, we all are aware of it, shipbuilding industry has a downstream effect wherein it generates employment, it sustains innovation, it sustains indigenization. So for example, if we look at Cochin Shipyard, when we went ahead with the constructing INS Vikrant at Cochin Shipyard, the Cochin Shipyard employed approximately 1,500 workers. Additional 12,000 to 15,000 contracted laborers got employment for a period of 7 to 8 years. Because the ecosystem was such, and as Navy has gone ahead with indigenization, we ensured that 120 to 150 MSMEs got orders from Cochin Shipyard across 15 states and union territories. As far as revenue is concerned, close to 900 crores was given to these MSMEs for their contribution against orders for INS Vikrant. Now, if we look at the indigenous shipbuilding built in any shipyard within the country, it's a proud moment for all of us that the float capability is 100% indigenous. We do not import a nail also for float capability. We come to the move category. We have achieved 95% indigenous content in the move category. That is to say, our generators, our propulsion part, our power generation distribution, even navigation is totally indigenous. Being a warship, weapons are key. Maybe around 10 to 15 years, we were only 10 to 15 to 20% indigenous. Today, any ship which is constructed in India has 75 to 80% indigenous content in the fight category. That is, most of the weapons and sensors are made within the country by our local industry, and we are aiming to get 100% indigenous in fight category also in the coming years, and I am very sure by 2030 the Indian Navy would have 100% move, float and fight category indigenous content. Last, what I like to cover is, when warships are built, they are technology intensive. We have every technology on board a warship. Every skill set which exists in the industry is required for a warship, from welding, from piping, from cabling, from controls. I mean, you name it, every skill set is there. Why I say this is because for the audience sitting in front of me, there's an opportunity for each and every one of you to contribute towards this sector. As I brought out, our orders are flowing. We have a requirement of technology. If you have an innovative idea, if you have an indigenous solution, we are here to welcome you. Get your technology into the Navy and move forward. And as last but not the least, Navy does not believe in no cost, no commitment. We believe in partnering, holding your hand. You put your resources, we'll put our resources. You put your money, we'll put our money. Jointly, we will succeed. And if it is to be failure, we'll be with you, even if it's a failure. Let's work together. Thank you. That's what my views are.
Thank you, Admiral Sharma, for your insight into the sync tab. We are very happy to note that Navy is ready to handhold the ancillary industries to develop indigenous solutions to all your requirements. That's a very welcome thing. We'll come back to you if time permits in the next session. Now we move on to Arjun Chowgule, Executive Director of India's foremost private shipyard. He has deep experience in commercial shipbuilding, and even he has ventured into export market in a big way. So he is the right person to be here in this panel. The first question, Arjun, to you is that you have done a very good presentation in the earlier stage on the pricing part of the Indian shipbuilding vis-a-vis China and other countries. Now private shipyards are key to scaling capacity. What innovations are you prioritizing to make Indian shipbuilding globally competitive?
So in terms of innovation for the shipbuilding technology?
Shipbuilding part.
I mean, I think a lot of the, so there are two parts. One is in terms of productivity enhancements. Now, productivity enhancements are gradual steps that you continuously do within any type of business to improve efficiency, improve quality, reduce monitoring, those type of things. Which all businesses do, that's regardless of that. I think what the big change in India is going to be on scale, and which is really where the idea of the shipbuilding clusters has been spoken about for quite some time, because if you see how Indian shipbuilders have developed, naval dockyards, for example, they can't grow. They're surrounded. There's no place to grow. And if they grow into the sea, they can't even grow into the sea anymore. So that's how cities develop. But shipyards can't do that because that takes away the main asset of the shipyard. And if you see all the shipyards in India, they've really had limitations on growth because of that. But now you're having the new idea of the shipbuilding clusters coming in. The thing with the clusters, the interesting thing with the clusters is to see how it gets implemented, because that's really where the states start competing with one another. So Gujarat is going to compete with Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu and Orissa and Andhra, and possibly Karnataka and Kerala may also come in over there. And that's going to be the interesting thing. So if you're really talking about what are the type of innovations that are going on, my view is that the innovation is not so much actually in the shipyard, because those are, I would say, standard things. That's a given. That's going to continuously happen. People will move from this plasma cutting, laser cutting, CNC cutting. All of that has happened. And those will go on. Shot blasting earlier people used to do outside. Now you're having shot blasting and painting chambers inside, and the entire outfitting is getting done at the block level. So those type of things are part of what I would say natural evolution. On top of that, you have to give some steroids, and the steroids really is going to be the shipbuilding clusters. But the thing is with steroids is you have to see whether it's going to be good for you or bad for you, and the only way that to see it is to see how the states respond.
Yeah, that's true, because basically the states are going to be responsible, and I've seen at least a couple of states like Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu has gone much ahead with taking over the land and going ahead with the plans.
Yeah, the other thing with all of this is, and this is something that we all have to be cognizant of, to develop a new shipyard in a cluster, it's not a 2-year process. It's a 5-year process. By the time you actually start delivering the first ship, we're sitting in 2026 right now, the first ship will be delivered in 2030, 2031. You need a lot of operating patience, you need patient capital, there are a whole host of factors that get into it, which is why you need serious people being in this industry, and you need people who know the industry to be in there. Now how do you get the existing private sector shipyards, for example, they are the best place, but how do you incentivize them to deploy their own capital? Maybe that might not be sufficient. They will have to go out and raise capital. How do you incentivize that type of capital? How do you allow the existing private companies to say, okay, listen, I am going to open up and attract more capital into my business, which is something that not many of them have currently done. And that's really what the changes are going to be. It's going to be a very interesting time, but it requires, if you ask me, do I see this industry, if you get a lot of new people coming into the industry and investing who don't have a history over here, is that generally a good thing? I think it's good to a certain extent, but if you really want these things to work, you need to have people with the track record to be able to scale up. You can't have, very difficult to have a new person coming in and then operating at scale.
Yeah, that's one major thing which in fact I discussed with Jalota Sab also some time back. The moment people started looking at the 78,000 crores I mean, I've been approached by so many people in the recent past setting up new shipyards where they have no interest, I mean, no previous track record, nothing related, basically traders coming into the picture. I don't know anybody, I don't have the time to, but there was a scheme long time back about fishing trawlers, which became a big scam in early 80s.
No, but the shipbuilding industry is a very good industry to enter into to sink.
That's true.
I would say for a shipbuilding industry, a new shipyard, for example, going only the ship construction is not the way. You have to get into ship repair also. What happens, as I brought out during my part, that we've got lots of ships which are coming, which need to be maintained, which needs to be repaired. And we do have a capacity shortfall within our defense or the naval dockyard anywhere. So there lies an opportunity for the private shipyards to take over some of the load which the dockyards cannot handle. That would give them a shorter gestation period because the ship repair is limited to 1 year, 2 years. And we do outsource lots of ships to private shipyards. We're looking to outsource lots of ships to private shipyards.
But so on that point, I think with the amount of demand that is there, it's for companies to specialize. And I would say with the demand coming in, it's very important to have dedicated ship repair yards that can actually deliver to the demand at the right type of quality and dedicated shipbuilding yards. Because the workforce is very, very different. You know, the rates, the way that they are handled, the way that they're paid, the output that they generate is very, very different. My suggestion always within the industry has always been, if you're interested in repair, focus on repair, because that's really where you build the competence.
Add to that.
I just want to add, the Indian Navy looks at Indian Ocean region as the net security provider. That means any maritime security incident between the east coast of Africa and Southeast Asia, Indian Navy is there with its assets. I think what would it take for us to be the net ship maintenance, refit and repair provider for the Indian Ocean region? I think that's the mindset we need to have. Because this is an area, we are growing at just 5 to 6%. And I think if we create a short-term vision, short to medium term, of ship repair and ship maintenance, I was commanding the Mauritius Coast Guard when I was in the Navy, and I can tell you, Mauritius, we had 2 repair and maintenance shipyards there. India had no presence. They were French and British. And the kind of pipeline they had and the profits they were making. Mauritius sits like a wayside cafe, especially after what's happening in Suez, to most of the ships coming around the Cape of Good Hope. So I think ship repair, ship maintenance is something which is achievable, low-hanging fruit, which I agree with the Admiral and Arjun as well. And that is something we should target, and we should create a white paper on that. I think that's a precedent. Be a net maintenance provider for the Indian Ocean regions to start with.
Thank you. Continuing with Arjun, about the latest, ours is a Harit Nauka summit. So what are your thoughts on the hybrid propulsion and the new technologies being added, like duplex steel and composite materials for the shafts and things like that?
Yeah, well, at a global level, it's always good. I mean, one, it's required because of reducing emissions, becoming a more responsible part of the entire global industrial ecosystem. And it's driven by regulations, and that was bound to come. On the technology side, it is very interesting because you have challenges that need to be overcome, and people have to think behind it. Engineering solutions have to be provided. So we're having that type of development. So it makes whenever you get challenging projects are very interesting. You don't do, there's a limit to which people will work for money. People want to also work for something that drives them, that makes them think through problems, think through solutions. There are obstacles, they have to go overcome it. That's what makes work and life worthwhile. I think it's a good thing from that perspective. I think, but if you're looking at it from India, the ecosystem is, again, we're not developed on the mechanical side. Now suddenly you're getting into energy materials, electronics side. And we'll have to really run a marathon very, very fast over there. Countries have taken 2 generations to get there. We'll have to probably do it in half a generation or so. And when I say a generation is around 25 years, so we have to get there in around 10, 12 years, which is a very, very rapid rate that we have to go to over there. But it's going to be a challenge. Everybody has to work together. And this is where the big advantage is, because you get people not just from our industry working. You'll get people from other industries that can actually start contributing to our industry, which is people from energy storage systems. They typically don't work with marine industries. You can get them to come in. Electronics, cable, people who work in the cable industry, all developing products for this industry. I think that's a good thing. You expand the net of the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, it's challenging as well as exciting with the new technologies and all coming up. Now on the last part, very short this thing is on the green shipbuilding part. I was just going through the recent developments of the Green Tax Initiative by the Government of India. But when I looked at the figures, I don't think it's very pragmatic to sustain in the long run, because the daily rates of the tax are going to be more than 1 crore a day. And the cost of the green tax are going haywire. Is it going to be a sustainable thing, or you think it's going to work out?
No, but if you look at the tenders that have come out and the prices that people have bid, the rates have been coming down to the level that I have the other side of the question. I'm saying, is it going to be sustainable for the company owning the tugs to operate at these rates for the next 10 years? And which is fine, and people are taking their individual business decisions on this. The ports are going to have the benefit, hopefully, as long as the tugs are in operation for that amount of time. I would say really let there be competitive bidding over there. Let there be the market working on that. Really what you have to do is you have to ensure that once the tugs are in operation, the tugs don't get off operation, And that really comes by the type of financing that you provide. Today, a green tug, which is something that is going to cost minimum 100 crores, is going to get a loan of 7 years, 8% interest rate, 7 years, and they are going to have a contract for 15 years. So unless you actually allow that to be classified as infrastructure status, you're not going to get the contract to match the term of the loan. And but if you're able to do that, you will have, I think that'll be it's a low-hanging fruit. If you're able to do that, you will have a very, very sustainable supply over there. Because what the ports also want, they just don't want a low price. They want reliability of service. And one of the key things on the reliability of service is if the tug operator is actually able to sustain his operations.
Yeah, that's true. That's exactly what.
So I would just say the main thing is for the finance ministry, actually. It's not the shipping ministry over here. It's the finance ministry to allow all vessels above 24 meters to be getting infrastructure status, which is what the industry classification is. It's not and right now they've said 1,500 ton gross tonnage, which personally I feel is completely wrong.
Which is not correct.
And the other thing is nobody loses. If you put a 24 meter, the government is not losing money, because the only thing that you're enabling is them to get better terms of financing. What is actually going to happen is you're going to have the entire ecosystem, the entire economy to reduce logistics cost. It's going to benefit the entire economy, But
That's right.
I don't know, it's an arbitrary thing, 1,500 gross tonnage. According to me, it makes no sense. If they were to do 24 meters, which I know is what the Ministry of Shipping has also been putting forward, DG Shipping has been putting forward, if they just listen to what the industry, how they define themselves, I think really have multiple policies
that
are working.
One arbitrary figure, they just put 1,500 tons.
Well, earlier they had put a rupee number, which was, that was the idea. Now they've come up to a tonnage number.
Yeah. Okay, we'll come back to you if time permits. Now we move on to Sapna Deepu, AGM Forward Design from Mazagon Dock, on our leading defense shipyards. And with her insight. She has been connected with forward design and marketing for the last couple of decades, so she can give us a very good insight into what's happening. Now, you have been a major defense shipyard, but you have been also trying to do some commercial shipbuilding for the export market. How do you correlate between these two activities, and what is your take on that?
If you really look at the defense shipbuilding, you can say that the defense shipbuilding has been the backbone of Indian maritime strength, we can say that. But it doesn't mean that we need not look into the commercial shipbuilding. As a shipyard which was continuously contributing to the defense shipbuilding, we have learned many innovative methodologies or maybe a very good norms and standards, stringent norms and standards in quality and quality control and shipbuilding, which can actually assist in the commercial shipbuilding. If you really look at the, spending almost 31 years in Mazagon Dock shipbuilders, I have seen the company transforming from the conventional shipbuilding to the integrated construction, which actually reduces the time period, and that means it's like you can have more control on your quality also. So if you really look into the commercial shipbuilding and transform the commercial shipbuilding into this modularity, we can compress the timeline, and reliability will be more, and when you have to do more commercial shipbuilding, the scalability also increases by reducing the timelines. Then as a part of, sir also has told, like, we have indigenized almost, if you really look at the cost-wise, more than 70% of a destroyer or frigate built now is having indigenization content. 75% is a huge amount. I'm talking in terms of totality. So this means that we have helped the supply chain ecosystem to grow in India. That's the defense industry, because we had a mandate. It's not like the commercial shipbuilding normally, when it's, may not be having that mandate to do the indigenization. Having the mandate to do the indigenization, we have helped the supply chain to grow in such a way that the same ecosystem can be used in our commercial shipbuilding also. Maybe we may need to look into the more numbers in the commercial ships. And morning already the aggregate of commercial shipbuilding that is coming into Indian industry has been already talked in the morning presentations and all. So it's a good thing happening. So means the experience in the norms, quality control, and in the modularity and innovative design concepts, like let us take virtual reality or augmented reality, we use in our defense shipbuilding extensively to take care of the collisions or maintenance phase or doing inspections. All these things can be taken into a commercial shipbuilding or commercial ship design also. So, and lately MDL has also been taken up commercial shipbuilding, like we are having an order for in the general cargo sector, which is having low-hanging means many orders in the short sea areas. So that means defense shipyards taking into the commercial sector projects is narrowing the gap now, and we are poised to take more orders and take the commercial vessel shipbuilding also forward.
Are you working on some initiatives on green shipping?
No, green shipping per se in the commercial ships we are working on green tugs and all those things. But when we consider the defense ships per se, we have not got into electric propulsion till date. Maybe in PCVs, pollution control vessels of Coast Guard is having an electrical propulsion system, but not the larger defense vessels. But the next generation defense vessels are planning to have this electric propulsion in place. Maybe there may be a lot of technology, what should I say, factors we need to take in care, but still we are moving towards that at least electric propulsion in the defense shipbuilding also. So the designs will get mature to that level and take care of that.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll just like to substantiate what ma'am has brought out. So I was a lieutenant in 1999. I got posted on INS Mysore, which was being built in Mazgaon docks. It took, I could be wrong, by a couple of months or a year. It took 11 years for that ship to come from the keel laying to commissioning. After a couple of years, 6 years down, I came to INS Shivalik, again being built by MDL. It was built in 6 to 7 years, from keel laying to full commissioning. I was the ASD, and before I was DG Vesi. MDL is building ships in a span of 4 years, a fully lethal warship of the same size or bigger, more tonnage than INS Mysore in 4 years. With their processes, with their technology, and biggest of all, the indigenous content, breaking away from dependence on foreign OEMs, we have been able to cut down the timeline for construction of warship, which I personally presume is the most complex of any industry which is there, because I brought out the reason brought out. So they have really cut down the timeline using technology, and I think we need to take lesson from MDL and certainly other shipyards also, how they've cut down the construction timelines.
Yeah, okay. We are running short of time, so I will just jump into Vishal Kanwar. He has already spoken, but I didn't introduce him. He is from PwC, so global leader in consulting and advisory. So we are happy to be here because he gives us the perspective on the financing part and the funding part. So my question to you is that how can India align regulation, sustainability and investment to attract global players in this scenario?
Yeah, I think that access to capital is the elephant in the room. And how does especially private capital, strategic investors start flowing in? Yes, sovereign support is required to create the push factor, but eventually it has to be a pull. And what we heard from Manish Sharma's talk, and even Arjun and the DG Shipping alluded to it, moment you touch 5% of the global market share is when the pull factor gets created. That's when the private equity and the venture capitalist strategic investors start getting very interested. So to start with, I think you talk to a private equity or a strategic investor coming into this sector, the first thing is there a roadmap? We heard a demand generation, how government contributes towards, creating a demand. What is the market there? Do we have a roadmap? I'll give you an example. We in PwC recently did a strategy work for ISRO and InSpace. With Dr. Pawan Goenka, we created a 10-year roadmap, a decadal vision. Where do we see launch vehicles and satellite? I'm just giving a metaphor here. I think the need of the hour is there a strategic roadmap on where do you see the revenue potential, both domestic, Indo-Pacific? I mean, you could look at it globally for Indian industry, across all classes of ships, tankers, container ships, bulk carriers, and what is the roadmap we are looking at? If you look at the market, then you'll come to what is the total addressable market with the current capability we have. We bring in the defense capability. What is the serviceable market we have? And eventually, what is the revenue potential we have year on year, at least for the next 10, 15 years? I think that is the crying need. And, when you go to any investor, he wants to see where is this roadmap. He doesn't want to see, something, fruits hanging in the air. So, I'm being a little blunt here, so because we do deal with a lot of commercial due diligence for private equity investors. Next is, we have fantastic schemes which have come in. And I think what Arjun very rightly alluded, it's just about 3 to 5 billion. We are still behind the curve. How do we further increase this investment there? Then comes your R&D investments. Are you creating an IP in differentiating yourself in the Indo-Pacific, especially with the concentrated market of South Korea, Japan, and China? Is there a differentiation? And which are the areas you want to play in those areas? Do you want to play in hydrographic vessels which are what Indian Navy is doing today with the 4 defense shipyards is phenomenal. making a, I mean, I would go ahead and say that making a SSB and a nuclear-powered submarine in India, you could never have imagined that. That's what the government of India is capable of and the Navy is capable of. So are we selecting where we want to play? So I think all of this counts in how do you get financing. Then, of course, Arjun, what you just spoke about, green shipping. Can we have, carbon-based links, credit? If we are giving both on the supply side, on the demand side, how do you have, say, a tug which is on green propulsion? How do you create a viability gap funding from the sovereign? And that has to kick in, to create the industry push factor. I would also say that, PPP models, public-private partnership models, I'm just throwing an idea. What will it take Mazagon Dock Limited to partner with a private company and, get into commercial shipbuilding? Because they have the skill set, they have the capability. Of course, other areas of access to capital would also include using at multilateral forums. Asian Development Bank, big investors globally for looking at the entire Indo-Pacific area and looking at both shipbuilding and ship repair and refit collectively. Because I think when we see this separately, we really don't see what is in short, medium, and long term. Short term is where ship repair, ship refit are low-hanging fruits, and then you finally look at shipbuilding subsequently. So I think access to capital is something which is the most difficult. It's a choke point, I would say, in maritime terms. And how do we navigate this choke point is by the push factor from the government, sovereign investments, creating a roadmap, creating a white paper on what are the market we are looking at next 10 years, so as to attract private capital flowing into this, which creates a pull factor.
Thank you. Since we are running short of time, I will use the next 5 minutes to take questions from the audience before we wind up.
So, very good morning. Do I ask the question directly to the chair or one of the participants I can answer?
Can be either way. No problem.
So I just wanted to ask a question to Mr. Arjun Chowgule. So first of all, really appreciate your brazen, direct talk in your presentation, bordering just on how erstwhile Rahul Bajaj used to speak on business. So I wanted to ask you a question because you have spoken on a very large macroeconomic level that the stage at which presently India is at fourth or the third largest GDP, and you very clearly brought out the percentage margin. A very pure play businessman without wearing nationalism on his armband, why will he come into a 5 or a 6% market business when market tends to reward EBITDA margin? Without taking name of a company in India, a listed company in India removed shipbuilding from its listed name, just because market sentiment was causing the share to go down in the recent past. And second aspect is that as we have come to this level of a nation as a growing thing, isn't it better that in the overall shipbuilding we concentrate on the service part of the thing in terms of design and value addition than to go down the value chain in terms of shipbuilding? A very contrarian point of view. The reason why I'm asking you this question is that India has twice gone through this gung-ho thing. Once was in the power sector, which we know what happened with the Kelkar committee report of NPA. And now things are opening up exactly in the airport sector. Shipyards cannot open up like D-Mart next to each other across the country coastline, and then we have like a ghost thing. So as a pure play businessman, what is your take on this contrarian point of view for being cautious and approaching this sector?
Okay, so there's two parts to your question. I'll answer the first part first, which is on the margins and the valuation and a company removing the name, the word shipbuilding from its name. Look, this is just my perspective, and this is not something I'm saying that I would recommend for anybody else. This is just how I think. So I'll give you what my perception is. If people want to adopt it, that's up to them. When you're running a business, you'll do it for a long term. You're not looking at for 3 years' time. When you're on the capital markets, you're on the stock exchange, yes, valuation is important, but what is the main reason they're there for? Is that you can attract capital towards your business. Okay, so valuation does play a role because you know how much of your share gets diluted. So those are criteria that do go into it. But your primary reason is to attract capital and be a good source of capital. You have all your data that is published outside. My view is, look, if you're doing well, and we have seen a lot of shipyards, that while the typical percent, like I said in the presentation also, is 5 to 8%, right? You are able to move the needle through productivity improvements. And you're able to move the needle by another 3 to 4 to 5% also on productivity improvements. The other thing that I would also say is what we're seeing also, if you see the industry, companies that focus, and that's why I'm saying focus is very important, but if companies focus on particular types of vessels, you see they have better margins. Companies that are doing a wide variety of vessels, they don't have that great margins. The margins are much, much lower. Focus brings a lot of improvements over there. So I'm not getting into the things of the names and the wordings of that, but I would say that if you're looking at it from a margin perspective, the best way to improve margins is by actually focusing. The other thing with the margin issue is scale. When you're able to deliver, these are very, very high value items, so the profitability numbers are actually absolutely quite high. So that's really where it can be driven. On the second part of your question, so building, manufacturing versus services. My view, again, as a country, we do need to be making things rather than focusing our GDP and our workforce employment on services. There is no country in the world that has moved from developing to developed country by skipping the manufacturing and industrialization process. If we don't do that and we say we're just going to be on the service sector, we're not as a country going to develop. That's just my view. And I'll have a bet with you that if India doesn't become a strong manufacturing hub by 2047, we will not be a developed country. So we have to be on the building side. That's my view. Now, the services will assist the building. It will make the building more productive. So it's not that we don't focus on the services. It's required. But we do it with the aim of making manufacturing stronger. That's my 2 bits.
Thank you, Arjun. I think we have already run out of time. Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Kaushik. Arjun or anybody from DG, if they can give their perspective on this. See, the government has given fancy numbers in their guidelines in terms of how much they're allocating for the shipbuilding sector. And if you see the Greenfield shipbuilding guidelines, the government has said that the disbursement under the guidelines is subject to budgetary allocation. And if the government does not meet the budgetary allocation, they will disburse it in the next financial year. Now, if the government is being very aggressive, I think they should give a sovereign guarantee that once they decide to commit to a particular project, and if that project maintains that timeline, they have to come through with the funding. You can't have an exit clause in your guidelines saying that if I don't have budgetary funding, I will shunt out the disbursement to the next financial year. So that's my question. Do you think the government should now make it a sovereign guarantee that if they decide to fund a project, they have to disburse subject to timelines being met and not link it to a budgetary allocation? Because the investor is going to spend $50 million, $100 million in setting up a yard. And for your assistance, the government cannot link it to an annual budgetary allocation. That's my question.
Arjun, if I am not mistaken, there's a clear budgetary provision for all these things now. It's not only a policy decision now. There is a clear budgetary support for that, and it's not ad hoc.
View that this is what they're going to keep aside. But if you read the fine print, it says that disbursement is subject to budgetary allocation. And when the allocation cannot be met, it will be shifted to the next financial year. So it doesn't give an investor coming into India the full comfort that, listen, I'm going to invest $100 million, $50 million, and when this government says under a particular guideline which I am complying with, and if I am satisfying it, they can't back out later saying, listen, there is going to be a 6-month delay in disbursing because there might be a budgetary allocation with my finance ministry. So the guidelines provide that.
No, that's a good question. And I think government is making an investment plan, for example, for the Maritime Development Fund, for ship, for each of those 70,000 crore, which, so it is there in the offering, and I think...
I mean, it is there in the offering, but the fine print, once you go through it...
Yeah, so that, absolutely. So I think...
Government needs to make it a sovereign guarantee that once I am committing to a project, I will disburse for that project. Subject to timelines being met, no further exceptions.
There I agree with you.
A lot of clients have asked us the same question.
Yeah, and I agree with you. The devil lies in the execution more than... so I think how this is executed, the disbursement of 70,000 crore budget over the years is the biggest challenge, in terms of the roadmaps. And that's exactly what I said. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, thank you. Any more questions? Yeah, please, go ahead.
My question is more towards the tugs that you mentioned about the Green Tug Technology Program. It's a very interesting program. They say that you want to have about 50 plus tugs by the time it's 2030. Talking about the infrastructure, and you mentioned that the push is to look at 24-meter tugs or 24-meter vessels plus to get into the infrastructure. Don't you think that the tugs should also be included, because you do have the tugs which are 20 feet, 22 feet, and if they should be included in the infrastructure projects? That's one. And
so on that I've already answered. I'm saying that if you don't make it, this policy is not going to be successful.
Right.
So you have to make it. The government, the finance ministry has to include it in the harmonized list.
The second part is that the capacities of the shipyards to build the tugs is very limited at this stage. How realistic would these numbers be if you really say that what we have right now, maybe adding few more shipyards, will we be able to meet all the requirements for the tugs? It's not just the green tugs.
Sorry ma'am, just because I see the red light flashing and I see somebody have coming on the stage, I'll answer that very quickly, just understanding what your question is. Capacity of shipyards today to make tugs is, there is an issue with capacity of Indian shipbuilding today. We need more shipyards. It's not that all the shipyards that are operating today can build these tugs. We don't have an issue with shipyards necessarily, not all. Most of them can build these tugs because the tugs are not big vessels in that sense, they're very, very small vessels. The issue is, do we have enough shipyards to actually execute on this? My personal take on this, and also something that we're doing, is eventually you will have to have dedicated shipyards that are only churning out tugs, like almost like batch production. Like you have automobile companies churning out cars in batch production, just one model coming out of a particular factory. You will have to have that type of thing done over here, because this is not 50 tugs. The 50 tugs only till 2030. It's 200 tugs according to me till 2035.
That was the thing. It's like something like Daman that you have. That you just have the production of the factory which is just churning out the standard size of the
If there's no people from Daman over here, yes, it's like Daman, but with better pricing.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you. We have really run out of time, so I can't take any more questions now. Maybe we can interact during the lunch break, and if there are any further questions. Thank you, panelists, Vice Admiral Sharma, Arjun Chowgule, Sapna, and Vishal Kanwa for your valuable insights. This should have been an interesting, much more interesting, but we have paucity of time, so we had to cut short. Thank you all once again.
Thank you, panel, for that very interesting discussion. May I invite Captain Tyagi to present you all with a token of appreciation from the chamber. A huge round of applause for. Request you all to stay back for a group photograph. Request you all to stay back for a group photograph, sir. A quick group photograph.